I've posted a daily podcast for 700 plus days and only 7 to 10 hours per week using systems and processes. And that same mentality can help you undertake huge projects in a manageable amount of time. The first thing I did was understand the essentials. If I had 7 conversations every week, all about an hour long, I'd have a daily podcast. What about the other stuff? Technology and my virtual assistant helped me do it all. I put in 20 to 40 hours up front to think through the whole process. I implemented the process for 1 to 2 episodes and recorded how I did it. Then I gave that video to my virtual assistant and put the information in a Word doc that she could refer back to. I used Calendly, automated emails, editing software, and my VA to take care of all the little things. I even asked people the same questions that were designed to pull unique content from each guest, and this cut out the prep time. Finally, I accepted a dip in quality because I wasn't going to train myself on editing or pay somebody to do it. Use systems to save yourself time and take on big projects that accelerate your growth. So, how do you get these systems and processes? How do you accelerate your growth? The first thing you have to do is you have to document everything that you're doing, which means before that, you have to know what you're doing. See, the first thing I did was I took the 20 to 40 hours up front. I just spent the time and I was like, okay, what is going to happen? When they sign up, where are they going to sign up from? So I found a podcast kind of database where we can get people to sign up. What's the message we're going to send them to help them come on the podcast? So I drafted a template message to help them come on the podcast. When they schedule through the Calendly link, how are they going to know what to do before showtime? I can't be conversing with every guest, especially if I'm going to be having, in the beginning it was 3 interviews 6 days a week. So I was having 18 interviews a week. That's crazy. I couldn't be going back and forth with all of them because I was also working a full-time job. And so it was important that I would, just talk to people and think, hey, this is what you're doing. These are the steps. I'll see you at the time. And some people didn't like that, right? Some people didn't like the system. They were confused. But it was always like, you're going to show up. I'm going to ask you these questions. This is how it's going to go. It's a casual conversation. This is the podcast, and I do it this way for a reason. So I guess the 700 plus episodes was 18 hours for the first 7 or 8 weeks, but pretty shortly after that, I shifted to 6 to 7 episodes per week because I had my 90 backlog. So I guess the longest I ever spent on this was 18 hours because I literally did 18 interviews, but all my time was spent on interviews. And that was because I documented my systems and processes. I went through the email. The email was very like, hey, this is the purpose of the podcast. This is the stuff I need you to send me beforehand. This is the content of the podcast. We're going to do it on the Zoom. The link is in the calendar invite. If you have any questions, make sure to ask me. And my virtual assistant would forward me those emails if they had any questions, and I would answer a couple questions, but not that many. And I wouldn't even really check my email that much because I was like, look, you're going to show up or you're not. I'm doing 18 of these things. That's more than 1 per day. So after that, it was like, what's the post-podcast plan? Well, I didn't want to edit. That's the only part I skipped because I was like, this is going to make me procrastinate. I was like, done is better than perfect, which is the next point I will talk about. However, I did have my VA cut up some clips and be like, hey, let's start putting this on social media. I think that might have happened 9 months into the podcast or 6 months or whatever it was. And I created a graphic. We had a template graphic where she just had to put people's picture in the slot and change the title, and then we'd be good to go on the podcast. And these are some of the systems I put in place, and it took me a little bit up front, and every now and then we had to tweak something, but by and large, the only thing I had to do to record this podcast was show up for the recording because my VA handled it all, and she did so in a short amount of time herself because so much of it was automated. When you plan your systems and processes with a goal in mind to automate as much as possible, make it as simple as possible. And I was optimizing specifically for production. Not even quality production, but just production, because I need to prove to myself that I was consistent. And so that's why I didn't do the editing. That's why the podcast graphic looked the same. The questions were the same. Because I was like, I'm going to do this daily podcast and I'm going to get it going. And that all started with my systems and processes, knowing exactly how it was going to go, and then writing it down and being very clear and making sure I knew exactly how to do it so that if something was wrong, I could tell my VA exactly what to change. Which brings me to my second point. guys, my podcast was not perfect. It's still not perfect, but done is better than perfect. And that's the mentality I had to adopt for all of this. Get your systems and processes outlined and make sure that people are following them. And it's better to follow an average system and an average process and consistently get an average result, because then you can optimize the systems and you can optimize the processes and then you can optimize the result, as opposed to sometimes getting really amazing results and sometimes getting really crappy results. A done system is better than a perfect system, because right when it's done, that's when you can start to optimize, and nothing is ever perfect the first time. That's why I had to realize on the podcast, my podcast system slowly got better. I slowly asked different questions. I niched down, and now 2 years in, it's at the point where it's like, I've changed my questions. I was exploring. I niched down into what I really wanted to do. I'm getting the cash flow to support that now. Now I'm planning to grow the podcast with a community behind it and something that I can really stand behind and something that's actually valuable for people. And I'm just willing to go the extra distance for a lot of this stuff because I've kind of figured out along the way really what I want. And I never would have had the clarity that I have now had I not started with a done is better than perfect mentality, because you just have to optimize along the way. So few people realize what they want long term at the beginning. And I'm still at the beginning. Like in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, this podcast could take on a different thing. It could be a whole show. It could be, I don't know, podcasts are kind of blown up. They're a big form of entertainment, but it could probably go into like a YouTube series or a something on Instagram or something on TikTok, other than just cut up reels of this. It could transform over the years as my following grows and as I get feedback from people. And that's all because done is better than perfect. And I consistently put out the content, consistently got better, consistently worked my systems, and just made tweaks along the way. Like we figured out how to do subtitles probably a year ago. But a year ago, I couldn't do I couldn't record like this consistently. I was just on my laptop with the headphones. I didn't have the equipment. I didn't want to set up the technology. Now I set up the tech. But it's just my iPhone and a ring light. Later, 2 years down the road, it'll probably be a cameraman and a professional media crew, and then my content will look even better. And I plan my content using Alex Hormozy's $100 Million Leads book, which wasn't there 2 years ago. And it'll be here 2 years from now, but somebody who's better at using it will be using it, and who can dedicate more time to the hooks and to the offer and to the hook story offer is what Russell Brunson calls it, right? $100 Million Leads uses something a little bit different. I think it's hook, retain, reward is what it uses. But all this to say, done is better than perfect. And when you document your systems and processes, yes, they may suck, but my podcast was horrible in the beginning. It's probably still horrible now, but it's a lot better than it was because I am better than I was, and I will continue to get better because done is better than perfect. Now, I've talked a lot about optimization. The third thing I want to point out is just the lessons I've learned along the way. It really does pay to start taking massive action in whatever way you think is massive. Massive for everybody is different. Like Dwayne Johnson, who is a media tycoon and a billionaire business person, a massive action for him looks a lot different than a massive action for me. Like massive action for him might be $10 million on production annually for any podcast he launches. Massive action for me might be posting daily and boosting each reel with $5 to $10. Like, those are both massive actions, just given our situation, given our resources, that's what we can do. And given our creativity, he's much more creative than I am, given that he's been in business a little bit longer and he has wider perspective, more resources to work with so he can be more creative. Whereas I'm like just thinking with my W-2 salary and with the couple of people I have in my LLC and just trying to get more cash flow. My focus is also a little split between sober living and the new 1%, which, it's just the lessons you learn along the way. Before I was trying to do 15 things, now I'm trying to do 2. And 5 years from now, I'll probably look back and like, had you just done 1, you would have been much further along, much faster. But I have learned the power of focus, just I'm also stubborn. So Yeah, there we go. That's kind of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about, just the importance of systems and processes, how it's gotten me to where I am with the podcast. That done is better than perfect mentality. And then just that you learn along the way. The stuff that I learned is really A, the skills of marketing, B, the skills of sales, C, the skills of like how you actually provide value. I would say not even sales actually. It was really just marketing and structuring an offer. Sales I learned through my jobs along the way and some persuasion books that I read. But also, I just learned kind of the importance of like-mindedness in community. Like you can't just rally everybody around everything, because when you're marketing everything to everybody, you're reaching nobody. You got to really niche down, get a specific message to a specific target audience. I would say that's the biggest thing I learned. Specific message, specific target audience, and make sure the finances of the business makes sense. So that's what we got for you guys today on the show. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one. And remember, we are a community of people judged not by our wealth, but by our impact.